Eric Bieniemy has been hired as the next offensive coordinator for the UCLA Bruins. Deshaun Foster getting a very, very big time addition for his coaching staff with hiring Eric Bieniemy. Joe, what do you think about this hire?
Yeah, I said at the top of the show, I thought that Deshaun Foster was a little bit of a, I'm going to repeat it. I thought it was a little bit of a lazy hire. A guy who didn't really have much experience calling plays, didn't really have any head coaching experience, none of that stuff. Was very wary about the hire. Him getting Eric Bieniemy to call plays is so huge. I would have thought, and I would have made the argument that Eric Bieniemy would have been the perfect guy to be the head coach. That would have been a perfect job for him to be the head coach of UCLA and then to really build up his resume, his repertoire as a head coach, as so many people have doubted his capabilities as a head coach. But I know for a fact, to focus on him as an offensive coordinator, that he's a brilliant offensive mind, and he has been around one of the greatest offensive minds in the NFL for a very, very long time in Andy Reid. Their offense, maybe not this upcoming year because they've got a lot to figure out roster-wise, but they could be very explosive. They could be one of those teams that sneaks up on you and catches you off guard when you're not paying attention. He's a great coach. This is an awesome get. I'm not eating my words on Deshaun Foster, but I will give a lot of credit to him for convincing Bieniemy to join the staff.
I will on my words about him. Let me tell you what I think. Two things are happening. Number one, I think Chip Kelly pissed off the people at UCLA. And Joe, I think that they made a financial commitment to go and getting an offensive coordinator that can come in here and really call plays. Joe, I think it's a big deal. Now, coordinators don't necessarily always recruit. That's what I think Foster will come in here and do. Joe, this is one of the biggest splash hires in college football that we've had, obviously, since Chip Kelly left and went to Ohio State. I just got to admit, I was caught off guard by this, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think everyone was.
Well, right. I'm so caught off guard that, Joe, do we have to start taking Foster as a little bit of a, like, hey, man, can UCLA actually come in here and do something? How big is this hire? Because if they'll make this hire once, they'll make this hire again. From a coordinator standpoint, I mean.
Well, so here's one thing that I think we don't really have any context on is I wonder what the relationship is like with Deshaun Foster and Eric Bieniemy. Like, I wonder, because I have absolutely no idea if there is any connection to the two of them or not. Is this a proof of them being willing to spend the money and go out and grab a huge name? Or is this an example of Deshaun Foster just being able to use his contacts well, which both things are hugely positive. They're both hugely, hugely positive for the direction of this program. I kind of see where you're going with this. Again, regardless, if he's probably only going to be here for like a year or two. He's probably going to jump back up to the NFL before we know it. And then
he'll have to pay a buyout.
I wonder what his buyout is.
I don't know, but they'll have to pay it.
I would wonder if his contract, if he didn't deliberately put something like that in there.
Who really knows? Who really knows? But why wouldn't he? I mean, it protects his school. I mean, he wouldn't mind if it's $1 million. It's $1 million.
He's also from LA, by the way. I didn't know this. So he was born in Louisiana. Yeah, he's born in Louisiana. He was born in New Orleans, but it says
went to Colorado, played running back.
He played running back in Colorado. But he went to high school in West Covina, which is not far from LA. But originally, when they moved to the area, he was in Hollywood. So he's familiar with the area.
I don't know if he doesn't go out there and recruit a little bit. I don't know if UCLA, from the recruiting aspect, doesn't start kicking USC's ass.
UCLA in 2005, when he was the recruiting coordinator, how were they? They were the 16th ranked. They were 10-2 that year.
Hey, now.
They were a good football team.
Uh-oh. UCLA on the come up. From the on the field, Joe, I will be interested to see how play calling changes with him. I mean, obviously, like the big thing in college is that the hashes are wider. In the NFL, they're much more narrow. Okay, I know that that's a big deal. obviously, because quarterbacks have to make bigger throws. I think this, like Joe, and obviously my team plays them in a couple of weeks early in the season. I am so intrigued to watch them play. I think for me, they are the most intriguing West Coast team out there right now.
Yeah, it's never always a foregone conclusion that an offensive coordinator hire like this immediately hits the ground running because the games are very different. Yeah, right. It might not, but I don't know, man. I think that I look at the Big Ten and I see a bunch of slow-ass defenses, and I just think of the potential here. I really like John Michael Sturdivant, who is very, very explosive. He was a bit unproductive at receiver for them this past year. If I have a pick for a random guy to win the Blitnikoff, it is going to be John Michael Sturdivant.
Is Carson Steele back, or did he go to the NFL?
He went to the NFL.
Okay. If he wouldn't have gone to the NFL, I'd have been like, man, he might have,
Yeah.
No telling what would have happened. I do think it's interesting. Obviously, the quarterback position is going to be a big deal. What do they do there? I will say this, Joe. I went and looked at this the other day, and I wrote this down. Did you know that they have 5 offensive linemen that are seniors, 4 of them returning starters on their offensive line?
I'm not that worried about the roster this upcoming year, especially because they hired Foster and nobody hopped in the portal.
So you might think what you're saying is if you're not mind of their roster right now, which I'm not really either, Joe, they might win 8 games.
Without Bieniemy, I don't know if I'd be that bullish, but I don't hate that. I don't hate that. I think that this really raises the ceiling, not the floor, the ceiling for what UCLA does in 2024. But where things start to get hairy is the next season when it's, Bieniemy's second year and he's probably looking on to the next opportunity, and you recruited 10 kids and you don't really have anybody coming in any depth, you're going to be scrambling. Like that's where things are going to get really, nut cutting time.
Yeah. And look, how does Eric Bieniemy come into Death Valley in week 4, I think, and take on LSU? Like, look, man, that's a bit – people are going to say I'm biased. It's fine. Could you imagine as a head coach your 4th game going to Baton Rouge at night in October with drunk people?
Well, the talent on that LSU defense is mediocre, so I'm sure he'll have a field day.
I think people from a national perspective will say that. I think it's more play calling, but we'll see. Well, 1,000% see. Blake
I'm saying that mostly jokingly.
Yeah, I know you were. I like to hire Joe. I think this is one of the bigger hires that they can make, and good for UCLA. Let me ask you this question before we get to Dell McGee really quickly. Does this say something bad about Eric Bieniemy?
I will, from what I've heard, and I think from what a lot of people talk about, him not getting hired as a head coach, I think has something to do with his personality. And I think some people have not liked working with him. But I don't know from enough close interaction to know if there's truth to that. So I'm not going to give it.
Kind of do. You got LaShawn McCoy out there saying how big of a piece of S he was on First Things First or whatever that show is.
Yeah. I just don't want to make any assumptions. I think he could be a great head coach.
McCoy can also be a piece of shit too.
Right, exactly. I think he could be a great head coach. I just think a couple of things didn't bounce his way. A lot of people discount how difficult it is to interview for a job opening when you're playing in a Super Bowl. When a lot of times those guys that get hired away are usually from teams that lose before the championship round or in the championship round. I just think it's teams getting patient and they rush that decision. So it was hard for him to get one of those jobs. And then, he bails, he goes to Washington, and that was a bad decision because he's jobless. So in 5 years, if he's an NFL head coach, I would not be shocked.
I don't disagree with that.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.